My friends and I back in college would not necessarily call ourselves ghost hunters, but we would like to go into the middle of the woods at night and find abandoned houses, graveyards, and the like, which are plentiful to find when you live in the middle of nowhere. A common place for us to go was this park that was very far into the woods and had an old covered bridge that was supposedly haunted. As an explanation as to why this bridge seemed so scary, there is a light at the end of the bridge, and the shadows off the trees form what looks like to be a figure. When you sit in the middle of the bridge, the wind makes the figure look like it's moving towards you. To the unsuspecting visitor, this can frighten you very much. So we like to take our friends out there, and we would love to freak them out a little bit. To set the scene, it was late summer on a Wednesday night, probably about 2 a.m. We were all out for summer break and had nothing going on, so we decided to take a couple of friends down there to the bridge to give them a good scare. This area is not easy to get to. There are a lot of steep hills and rocky roads. It's very secluded, so as expected, there were no other cars on the road. We got down to the bridge, and as we had so many other times before, it was tough to see the light at the end. But there were definitely plenty of shadows around, so the scare factor was pretty high. So as you're supposed to do, we parked our car in the middle of the covered bridge and turned our lights off, as well as the engine. Immediately, the people that we brought with us saw this shadow figure approaching our car. We obviously tried to play it up and act like we saw it coming towards us as well, to continue to scare them. But something was all wrong this time. The figure seemed a lot more lifelike, not like the trees swaying in the wind. It didn't feel like an illusion at all. I looked over at my friends and could tell that they noticed something was different this time too. It was at that point that I noticed that we were no longer looking at a shadow figure at all at the end of this bridge. This one had actually moved directly in front of our car. In a panic, I turned on the headlights because it was becoming a bit too real. Once the lights came on, the figure did not disappear, and it did not stop inching towards the car. There in front of our car was a person in a black hoodie and all black pants, hoodie over his head, looking down at the ground. After the lights came on, he kept inching towards the car at a snail's pace. We thought it was a prank. Someone saw us coming down and was probably familiar with the story and wanted to mess with us. We opened our windows and yelled, "Hey, you got us. That's pretty good." He had no reaction. Thinking he was just trying to stay in character, we laughed it off and backed out of the bridge and started heading up the hill. There was a parking lot at the top of the hill, still pretty deep into the woods, maybe a minute or two drive from the bridge. We decided to head up that way and gather our thoughts and sort through and process everything that had just happened, since the adrenaline was still running pretty high. We got to the parking lot, which is normally a quarter full on a busy weekend during midday with hikers because it's a pretty popular spot for hiking. But 2 a.m. on a Wednesday should have not had anyone in this parking lot. Upon pulling in, every spot was full. Considering the park closed at dusk, this was a disturbing discovery. We parked in the middle of the lot trying to figure out what was going on. I grew up just minutes away from this area, and the amount of cars in this lot was probably equivalent to the nearest town's entire population. We sat in the lot for about 5 to 10 minutes, just talking to each other, trying to figure this out and what was going on, when 2 German shepherds came running down the hill. They stopped at our car briefly and then continued running off into the woods. The girl that we had brought with us had a look of horror on her face and told us that we needed to leave now. Confused and still a bit concerned, I agreed and we left the area quickly. She put everything together. She said that cult activity in the area around us was very high, that there were reports of people doing satanic worshipping. German shepherds just so happened to be commonly used for animal sacrifices. I do not know where she got this information, but all I know is that it's been about 5 years now, and I never saw her again, and I never went back to that bridge at night again. Does anybody have an explanation for this? Can she possibly be right? If so, where has she been at this entire time? When I was 19, I was a venture scout, sort of like Boy Scouts, only for older kids and it's gender mixed. I decided to go to this week-long mixed scout and crew camping trip with my friend, but a few days before going, my friend for the venture scouts bailed. So I'd be going up into the mountains alone with a bunch of strangers, which was no big deal to me. I can handle myself. But I got there and I was the only venture scout, and the only girl. It was a little awkward, but most of the Boy Scouts were pretty nice and easy to get along with, although they weren't used to camping with a girl. They happily accepted me just as one of the guys. But then there was this one guy, Danny. From the first day of camp, he wouldn't take his eyes off me. He'd just stare at me. It was a little uncomfortable, yeah, but I figured maybe he was just socially awkward or something, with girls or something, and tried to pay him no mind. The next day while we were hiking, we all split off into pairs, and it turned out that I was paired with Danny. He looked a little too excited about this idea, hiking with me alone. His eyes always seemed to be a little too wide, like a bit crazed looking. But he was a small guy, spindly, unkempt hair, and a little shorter than I was. I was 5'7". I figured I'd be able to take him on in a fight if anything happened or he tried, so I didn't really raise a fuss about it. Before setting out to this hike, he kept asking me if I needed some help putting my sunscreen on. Even though I kept declining, he kept pushing the question and trying to put sunscreen on, until one of the guys told him to cut it out. While we were hiking, he kept probing me. "How old are you?" he'd ask. 19, almost 20, I'd reply. "Oh, don't lie. You must be a 14-year-old or something. You're so innocent. Young, innocent girls are always the cutest." He kept asking me innocent enough questions, like where I lived, if I had siblings, what my favorite color was. But then he started asking me these weird questions. He asked me if I had ever heard of BDSM. I was taken a little back by this, and was more than a little uncomfortable, so I'd pretend to just not know what he was talking about, all while trying to give as many hints to him as possible to just drop the subject. But he then started going on about what BDM was, about tying girls up, hitting them and burning them. At this point I was a little freaked out a bit, but I was trying to keep it cool. I didn't want him to know any type of distress, any chinks in my armor if I should say, as I knew he'd probably get off to me squirm. The only thought that I could really think of was, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Seriously, what the fuck? As I kept my eyes fixed on the path ahead of me, then he started to compliment my skin. "You don't see a lot of girls with pale skin. Do you use moisturizer?" he'd ask, attempting to touch my hand. But I kept my arm close to me, held fast in my backpack. I was incredibly tense, and every muscle in my body was screaming. I sorely regretted wearing that tank top at this point, and I could feel his eyes on me. He started telling me how my pale skin is beautiful, since you could see the rope burns and bruises better. The way he said it just sent chills down my spine, and the anxious knots started to form in my stomach, and they grew tighter. Then he asked me if I was a virgin, and then he started asking me other questions that I'm not going to talk about. But after he asked me these questions, I was wide-eyed in disbelief. I turned my gaze away from the dirt path and looked at him, and he was just smiling, a creepy, childish sort of smile. It was just so chilling. I kept silent and quickened my pace. He just felt too close, Far too close. I wanted to run at this point. He could probably see the fear in me at this point. There was no hiding it, but fortunately, I saw another pair of scouts were ahead of us, and I ran to them telling them that the four of us should group up and go together. At first they declined, saying that we're supposed to stay in groups of 2. But upon seeing how panicked and distressed I was, the 2 guys changed their minds. They looked confused at Danny, who was silently glaring at them. I was just glad someone else, other than Danny, was there. The 4 of us went up to the mountain, and I tried to keep close to these other 2 boys, and as far away from Danny as possible. Upon reaching the end of the trail, and regrouping with the others, the 2 Boy Scouts offered to switch partners to descend the mountain path. Danny looked downright upset, angry even. He was looking at me as if he was betrayed, but I didn't care if it pissed him off or not. I accepted the offer and switched partners, and was able to get back to the campsite relatively peacefully. On the way down, the Boy Scout I was with asked me if Danny was bothering me or something, but I lied and said he wasn't bothering me too much. After all, I was 19. I thought it would be pathetic to get distressed by someone that's a 15-year-old weirdo. I figured that, so as long as I stuck with this other guy, I'd be fine. But then the night, I was alone in my tent. Everyone else got to go to sleep in pairs of 2 or 3, but since I was the only girl, I had to be alone in my tent. It was always a little creepy being alone and isolated in the forest, away from everyone else. The scoutmaster insisted my tent be far away from the boys' tents so that they wouldn't bother me, but it only put me more vulnerable in an isolated position. I sorely wished that I had been closer in protection to the rest of the group. Late at night, I heard rustling outside. I figured it was just a deer or an elk or something, as it usually was, and went back to sleep. But then I heard the tent opening. Opening my eyes, I peeked through the crack in my sleeping bag to see what it was. And there, I saw the white of an eye looking back at me, looking through the opening of the small tent. It was Danny, staring at me. I froze, holding my breath. I held my dad's hunting knife close to me, hiding in my sleeping bag, not moving a muscle, and staring Danny down, pretending to be asleep, ready to fight at any moment, should he take one more step into my tent. But he didn't do anything. He just stared, watching me, breathing heavily, and muttering incoherent things to himself. "Are you there?" I thought I could hear him say. Eventually, after what felt like an hour, he left. The next morning, exhausted, I caught naps when I could and kept close to the other scouts in my group. It was difficult to maintain this calm and cool composure. The scout leaders were a little frustrated with me, since it seemed like I wasn't paying much attention to their instructions. But at this point, I didn't really care much. I was always on some level of alert, as Danny would sometimes creep up behind me and caress my neck, or play with and try to smell my hair. And every night Danny was there, watching. One night, he went digging through my backpack, looking for something. But unfortunately for him, I always kept my clothes and my personals tucked away in my sleeping bag with me. He left with nothing. I grew up in a rough situation and circumstances, so I always felt like I could only rely on myself. Asking for help was never an option as a kid. Asking for help meant you were weak. So it hardly even occurred to me. I was prepared to tough it out for the rest of the week. But a little over halfway through the week, Danny was called away by the scoutmasters and sent home. I got a feeling that it was the Boy Scout that helped me before, saw what he was doing, and sent a complaint about him to the staff. While everyone else was confused and happily saying bye, he just crossed his arms firmly and stared as Danny left. Danny looked so bewildered and confused by it all, like he didn't understand why he was deserving to be kicked out of camp. It was so strange. I tried my best to forget about it, and the rest of the week went off without a hitch. But the more I think back on it, the more I realize how damn freaky and bizarre this kid really was. I fear he may end up being some kind of serial, or something when he grows up. But all that I know for certain is that it was very disturbing. I'm just glad my dad told me, although knives weren't allowed at the camp, to take his hunting knife with me. My father insisted I keep it for protection, and I definitely didn't regret it. Hey guys, I just wanted to apologize for such a short video. My throat, on top of having some type of sickness that's going around right now, and my acid reflux on top of my throat. It's been very hard for me to record lately. I do want to apologize, and my content's gonna still stay consistent. So if you'll just bear with me, I'm gonna try to take some meds and see if they'll work and help me get back to normal. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you want more of these, make sure to comment in the comment section. Make sure to like, comment, and if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe to my community. We're doing nothing but growing. We haven't stopped growing lately, and I want to thank everybody that keeps on showing me some love. It really does mean a lot to me. Even though I'm sick, I'm still going to get some content out to you guys. So with that being said, make sure to check the links in the description as well. All of my socials and my Gmail down there if you want to submit a story. Make sure to check that out. Make sure to check out my Twitter, Instagram, everything. I keep up to date and I let everybody know before a video comes out. So with that being said, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one. And hopefully, I'll feel better in the next couple of days. This really sucks.